everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today I am going to answer some of your questions in video form. I usually read the comments on a lot of my videos and try to reply to your questions and suggestions about the projects. But there's some questions I get often enough that I thought it was worth creating a video with some of your frequently and less frequently asked questions. Before we jump in, please make sure you are subscribed to the ChemKnits Tutorials YouTube channel. Give the video a thumbs up and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. I am going to put timestamps down in the video description for the different questions so you can easily, hopefully, reference the ones that you are curious about, but there will also probably be some kind of more lightning round with some faster to answer questions at the end of the video. If I don't have access to a respirator for acid dyeing, could I just double mask? No. Please, 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 if you are going to be dyeing with any commercial dye powders, make sure that you have a proper dust mask or respirator. The respirator mask I use, which is linked down below, is a double half mask respirator with 2 P100 filters. I like this one because it has a really good tight fit on my face, and I really like it. It's fairly comfortable, but I did also start with an N95. You also want to make sure that it has a nice, good fit. If you go to a home improvement store, you should be able to find a lot of different types of dust masks, but you really, like a cloth mask isn't going to give the fit and protection to prevent you from inhaling particles, and you really don't want to inhale particles. It's not good for your lungs. So please make sure you get a proper dust mask or respirator when you're going to dye yarn with commercial dyes. And while I'm talking about safety, also make sure you get dedicated dye equipment that you don't use for food. I am still dyeing yarn in my kitchen, but I have a whole separate set of measuring tools, tongs, pots, pans that are different and intentionally purchased to look very different from the things I use for cooking. And when I'm dyeing yarn, I'm never also cooking and preparing food. So those are kept separate, and I clean and wipe down everything before transitioning my kitchen back into the family kitchen. How do you get over your fear and dye your first skein? Ooh, that is a really good one. I think a way that could be really good to give something a shot is take some leftover remnant yarn that you have. Say some leftovers from finishing a sock or just a really small amount. Get some food coloring and vinegar and just play and try it out. If you go back and look at the really old ChemKnits videos, I would dye maybe 3 grams of yarn at a time just to play around with different techniques, see what I liked, and then as I became more confident, I started dyeing larger quantities of yarn to use in various projects. So starting with small quantities can both help from a cost perspective, but also from a nerve perspective. If you're nervous to start trying because you're worried about ruining the yarn, using some remnants is a safe way to start and play. If the reason why you're afraid to start is you're not sure if you're gonna like what you get, don't forget you can always over dye the yarn. You can always take the yarn and take a darker color and add more of it if you don't like what you had. When I started Dye Pot Weekly, my goal was to start playing with acid dyes. If you go and look at some of those videos for early on, I was really nervous. I was really nervous. I had only used food coloring, and I wasn't sure with the transition and how I would like it and how easy or hard it would be. And so ultimately, the best way to get started is to just try and go for it. But I do recommend starting with food coloring if you're not sure if dyeing yarn is going to be something you enjoy, because then you don't have the whole setup cost of getting dedicated dye tools and equipment. It's very easy to get a wool-based yarn, vinegar, and some food coloring to play around with the various techniques, and then those techniques translate really nicely to commercial dyes. What's the best platform to sell yarn? Etsy or something else? This is a great question. It is really easy to get set up and create a listing on Etsy to start selling yarn. Each listing is only 20 cents to set up. And yes, there are other fees and stuff once you make a sale, but the cost to start is really low. And they handle all the back end. They handle the collection of taxes in states that require it, which may not be where you live in the US. And they also collect some international taxes for you. And so that is really, really handy. That being said, there are a lot of yarn dyers on Etsy, so it can be hard to get discovered there. For example, I drive all of my traffic to Etsy myself. I don't rely on their search results. So if selling my hand-dyed yarn were the main focus of my business, I absolutely at this point would go and set up a standalone shop, probably through Shopify, to have my own website. But some of these things that I mentioned, like the back end all being set up and some of the collection and payment of taxes being handled. And please note that this is not tax advice, but the fact that Etsy handles some of those things for me makes it worthwhile for me to stay and is a reason why I have not yet left. But someday I may leave and set up my own website. But since my big focus is making YouTube videos and the selling yarn is more sort of secondary to that, I don't want to do a move that is going to take a lot of my focus away from creating more content. And this feels like a good plug for the fact that there are still some 2021 ChemKnits Hanukkah samplers available for pre-order. This is one of my favorite things that I create in my Etsy shop. Every night of Hanukkah, I will share a new yarn dyeing video, and these samplers have wrapped mini skeins that you can open up and see the yarn as you're watching the video, and it's a whole lot of fun. So if you haven't pre-ordered yours yet, go and check out the listing. Do you dye full-time? Prior to your Patreon, was it a sustainable way to make an income? This question is a little hard to answer because I consider the primary part of my job filming videos here for YouTube. I see that as the primary thing I do, and then selling hand-dyed yarn is secondary. So yes, my job is to dye yarn, but all of this sort of stems from creating content here. In terms of revenue, I make money from a few different sources. Yes, I have a Patreon, as was mentioned in the question, and I have an Etsy shop, ChemKnits Creations. Links to both are down below. I also make affiliate income. I am an affiliate marketer for a variety of companies, including Amazon and KnitPicks, and so I often share affiliate links to things that I use down in my video descriptions or sometimes on social media. And as an affiliate, I do earn commission when someone makes purchases to something I recommend. And this is something that I wish I had known many, many years earlier, because there were a lot of products and things that I promote just because I share everything that I use in my videos. And when I realized that some of these sites had affiliate programs, I was like, oh, I wish I had known this a little bit sooner. So I don't make selections of the things that I use based on whether or not I can have an affiliate link. I share links that aren't affiliate links as well, but that is another source of revenue that is a very natural integration for me. And finally, I make ad revenue from my website and here on YouTube. So all of these pieces put together fund my business and my income. And so the short answer is yes, ChemKnits is my full-time job, but my revenue isn't all based on dyeing yarn directly. As I mentioned, there are diverse sources. There may be some other things that I'm forgetting to mention here. And if this is something that you would like me to do a more in-depth video about, let me know down below. How many days do you spend dyeing yarn versus editing videos? Ooh, this can vary a lot. Right now, when I am filming for Hanukkah, a lot more of my time is going into filming versus editing. And so once I get all the Hanukkah samplers shipped out, then I'm going to transition more to editing because I'll have that whole special series to edit. So it can really vary from week to week, but I think when I'm not working on a giant special series like this, I probably will spend 3 days doing as much filming as I can. Wednesdays for my kids is a half day of school, so I usually spend that either editing or filming conclusions for videos. And yeah, I mean, I lightly edit my videos, so in general it does take longer to film a video than it does to edit, which I think is probably rare for the YouTube space. But I do a lot of editing as I go. I leave myself vocal notes in my videos, and I let myself know if I didn't like that take, use the next one instead, to make the whole process a lot easier. The other thing that has helped make editing go a little bit faster was getting a better computer. I have a laptop that's technically a gaming laptop because those are the best for video processing. And so using that and a good quality video editing software, I use Adobe Premiere Pro. That helps me get the editing done in a faster period of time. This didn't really answer the question. I guess, like, maybe, oh gosh, I don't know. I do a lot of them at the same time. Like if I have a step where I'm waiting for an hour for things to pre-soak, I might be editing in that time. But I do try to give myself some dedicated, like today is an editing day. I need to finish videos. In a live stream, you mentioned you have chronic pain like me. How do you combine that and YouTube? I do have a chronic condition, but I don't really have any chronic pain. I have been living with chronic fatigue syndrome, or CFS, for over a decade, and there are periods where it's more of a struggle and less of a struggle. I think that for me, and doing YouTube, which gives me some amount of flexibility in my day-to-day, week-to-week schedule, that really, really helps. I find that I have to do a lot of balance in my day-to-day life and be careful to not push too hard, because if I start to overdo it, then I have a big fatigue sort of flare-up that is hard to come back from, which requires days and maybe even longer to recover and feel back to my normal, which is different from what was normal for me before all of this happened. So trying to balance things out and give myself buffering room in case I'm tired and I need to have that break is very important. And so therefore I try to always have some videos that could be inserted into the schedule last minute if needed and things like that. I try to film and have extra things unedited in case I can't film for some reason, but maybe I could do some editing. And so that way I can have that flexibility if I need it. This flexibility also comes in handy with having 2 young kids who may have sick days and unexplained things that come up as well. So trying to have that flexibility in there really helps for non-chronic conditioned things as well. If you don't have a chronic condition and want to learn a little bit more what living with one is like, I recommend that you go and check out spoon theory because it is a nice way to explain why doing some things over the course of the day might be harder for someone else. And so that's when someone asks me what it's like, I like to share that because thankfully I don't live with chronic pain. It is the fatigue and resulting brain fog from that that is very, very oppressive. Normally I do most of my filming in the mornings when I am the least hazy, but sometimes if I'm doing an evening live stream or something, if you've watched enough of my videos, you could probably start to tell when I start having trouble keeping my brain focused. But for me, the nice thing with yarn dyeing and with knitting is that it's easy to think like one step ahead. And with yarn dyeing, it's such a creative process for me that it is freeing rather than stressful. And so that and knitting have worked really well for me while I have been dealing with my condition. How do you deal with dyers saying you stole their colorway when you didn't even know? This is a hard question to answer, especially because I haven't dealt with this exact situation personally. Every month, I pick a new inspiration photo, which I share, and I encourage people to dye along with me. And through this process, people create colorways, and sometimes they are very, very similar, and sometimes wildly different from the same photo. And so part of this exercise is to show that two people can come up with colorways that are very, very similar independently without copying another dyer. However, copying is something that exists and does happen, and it can be emotional and challenging for the dyer who originally created the colorway. Of course, here's my asterisk. I invite people to copy my techniques and colorways. I do share my recipes so people can do that. But I do also encourage people to take what I've done as a starting point and then modify it and make it your own, maybe with your own colors or your own tweaks. I think that it's really important when you are pulling inspiration for your projects to look at the world outside of the yarn community. I think it's important to look at nature, books, movies, all kinds of things, but don't draw your inspiration from beautiful yarn you see going across your feed. Now, sometimes you might see something come up across your feed and think, oh my goodness, those heavy speckles are glorious. How might I create my own version of that? And I think that that is still okay, but you don't want to be looking at that picture and thinking, okay, I think that this person used these 5 dye colors, so I want to create a duplicate of this for myself. I do think that there is a difference between dyeing for your own personal use and dyeing for a shop or a business. And so I'm talking more from the perspective of dyeing and then selling your own colorways, where you definitely want to make sure everything that you're selling has your own spin on it. And so if your colorway inspiration is coming from sources that are not other yarn, then you can confidently say to another dyer, wow, what a coincidence. I was inspired by this when I created the colorway. And maybe if the names that you picked are the same, you can offer to change it. But honestly, there's probably dozens of pumpkin spice, candy cane, witch's brew type colorways out there. And so there are, again, some chances that names of colorways could be very, very similar. And I don't want to discount the feelings of a dyer who pours their heart and soul into developing a colorway and then having it exist, either be brand new or exist for a while, and then see something similar cross your feed. That can be really uncomfortable and not feel great. And so I don't want to discount that feeling. Just throw out there that it is possible, because there's only so many yarn bases, there's only so many dye colors. It is possible for two people to create something extraordinarily similar independently. In my opinion, while people can't copyright or trademark colors on their yarn, it isn't ethical to go and duplicate someone's colorway, especially for your own financial gain, unless the dyer invited you to do so. While I've never had anyone accuse me of copying exactly, I've had people tell me that, oh, this colorway is really, really similar to insert big company colorway that I've never seen before. And so the way I try to respond to that is be like, either, wow, what a coincidence, or take it as a huge compliment. And so a lot of times I do feel really flattered when someone compares something I've dyed to, say, Malabrigo or Madeline Tosh or other companies. Do I plan on using natural dyes? Yes, I have a whole playlist where I feature using natural dyes, and I have some other projects in mind. Especially, I'm currently growing up some marigolds, and so I've been collecting those petals. So sometime, probably this fall or next spring, I will film with that. But actually, if you go and check out on the main ChemKnits YouTube page, you can find playlists that group videos from different fiber types, sometimes different dye types, or general techniques and application. And so that can be a great way if you're searching for something in particular to find a grouping of videos. I will be working with textiles. I don't completely understand the purpose and use of mordants. Mordants are metal salts, metal-based salts that are used primarily with natural dyes to help the colored pigments bind to the yarn. The purpose of mordants is to help a colored molecule bind to your fiber. And the way that they do this, which I'm not going to go into the chemistry right now, but this can sometimes also shift the color of the molecule depending on the metal ion from that metal salt that you used. But it does help also more of the colored pigment bind to your fiber. Now, since natural dyes are a whole variety of different types and mixtures of colored pigments, the change that you see when you use a mordant versus no mordant can vary a lot based on the type of dye that you're using and the mordant that you're using. So in my natural dyeing playlist, I have a lot of examples of dyeing yarn that has been with a mordant and without. And in there are examples of where the mordant has shifted the color, say with logwood from brown to purple, or where the mordant helps make the color more intense, and even sometimes it makes it a little less intense. So it really does depend on the pigment, and there are many amazing books out there that talk about natural dyeing and which mordants to use for your project. I don't use mordants with acid dyes. I use acid, but that isn't really in the same category. That's changing the pH. It's not adding a metal ion that will interact with your dye and yarn in the same kind of way. I'm not going into the chemistry, but the complex of metal ions with colored molecules is really, really strong. And there are acid dyes that are pre-metallized to help with either the color intensity or the interaction of the pigment with the yarn, but I have never personally added a mordant to any of my acid dyeing projects. Have I ever been to Europe? Yes. I have been to France, Italy, Croatia, England, Wales, Ireland, and Northern Ireland. What is my favorite type of music? Probably like power ballad type things that I can belt out in the car. We talked about direct pigment dyes in a live stream once. I was curious if you've given any thought to trying it out. Some of the dyes that I have used probably have direct pigments in there. I think maybe even Dharma Turquoise has some direct dyes in there. But when it comes to direct dyes for like hair, I am still very intimidated by those, mainly because I've never dyed my hair before. So it is technically on the list, but I don't have any plans to play with hair dye to dye yarn anytime soon. Would you consider doing an Americolor pink food coloring comparison on yarn? I would love to see the different pigments that each one has. I do have a video where I have looked at all 50 colors from the Americolor Nifty 50 kit and seen the range of colors we have in there, but they weren't each individually labeled with the color, and I don't think that that's something that I am going to do. I do have plans to do more crude swatches comparing different acid dye colors in color families, but I'm not planning on including food coloring in that lineup. Can you tell me how to dye linen? For linen, cotton, or other cellulose-based fibers, I recommend using fiber reactive dyes and soda ash, or if that sounds intimidating, look for one-step tie-dye kits that you can find in big craft stores. I hope you enjoyed this video where I answered questions about yarn dyeing, YouTube, and some about me. But one more question. How can I support the content on the ChemKnits Tutorials YouTube channel? I'm very glad you asked. Please make sure you're subscribed, turn on notifications. Engaging with these videos is the biggest thing you can do to help support the content here. I do also have a Patreon and an Etsy shop, ChemKnits Creations, where I sell yarn dyed in my videos. So those are two other great ways to help support the content here. This was a lot of fun. This is gonna be really hard to edit. There was an editing question earlier. This is gonna take some time to edit. And depending on how long this is, I might even break it up into 2 videos. It's really, really fun to take the opportunity to answer some of these questions out loud. Again, I try to respond to questions on YouTube as often as I can. I don't always see replies if I've already commented on a comment. So if you have a question, start a new comment and I'm more likely to see it. But I hope that answering some of these questions out loud is really, really helpful. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and thank you so much for watching.